For decades, U.S. Africa relations have lived in the shadow of the Cold War, with a focus on conflict, security, and humanitarian crises. Last year, the Obama administration convened a Leaders Summit, shifting the focus to economic development. The Wilson Center recently launched the Brown Capital Management Africa Forum Series, and its inaugural event explored progress made since last year's summit. That's the focus of this edition of Rewind.
As many of you know, for too long, U.S.-Africa relations were defined by Cold War calculations, humanitarian crises, and conflict and insecurity, while economic and development matters were largely on the periphery of U.S. engagement with the continent. Under the Clinton and Bush administrations, development and economic engagement slowly began to take shape. But it was not until last year's historic U.S. Africa Leaders Summit, anchored by the U.S. Africa Business Forum, that President Obama tried to reposition U.S.-Africa relations by bringing economic and business issues squarely into the center of the U.S.-Africa relationship.
Some of the things from the PAC DBIA, as they call it, is really a standpoint of driving what can help American businesses do more business in Africa. And there are a lot of policy things, obviously, but more importantly, it's helping businesses understand what they need to do.
What are the prospects for renewable energy, particularly solar power, that will benefit Africa?
But it's a huge opportunity waiting to happen. The technology has now advanced and caught up, so it's now become a lot more commercially attractive. I see a huge, but probably the biggest potential for solar I see is in off-grid solutions. So we focus a lot on, big power plants on grid, but rural areas, off-grid solutions are a huge opportunity waiting to happen.
How can the American people be shown that the movement of these businesses will not be like the taking away of any U.S. jobs, right? We see Ford Motor moving down to Mexico, and many people feel that, it's a bad situation. I'm from Hershey, PA, right? Hershey Chocolate also moved down to Mexico. And how can it be shown that these potential jobs for the African people is not the same case?
Look at the African Growth and Opportunity Act that's been in place for 15 years. That's created about 3 million jobs directly and indirectly in Africa. And there's not one instance that our Congress has found of a U.S. worker being displaced by AGOA. And we heard from the Undersecretary of Commerce today that our trade with Africa supports some 250,000 jobs in the United States. And that's an important number in its own because it's growing. And it's also changing the dynamic of our relationship with Africa from one of the traditional donor-recipient to one of mutual benefit and mutual gain. So I think it's a relatively good story that needs to get better, and hopefully will get better.
A lot of U.S. companies are very leery of entering the African market because of corruption and particularly the liability that they have with the FCPA, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. So how do we overcome that specific barrier of companies who might be interested in doing business in Africa, but don't want to touch it because of the liability that comes with the potential for corruption?
Thank you very much for that question. According to Transparency International's latest report, the United States is ranked 17th on the Corruption Perceptions Index, and you only have 5 African countries in the top 50. Botswana at 31, Cape Verde at 42, Seychelles at 43, Mauritius at 47. And the rest of the African countries populate mostly the bottom of the scale. So that's a real issue.
I happen to think that the more we move away from commodities and extractive industries and get into industrialization and trade in manufactured products, the more difficult it will be for corruption to thrive. This is the lesson from the West, from the US, from everywhere. So investing in Africa's industrialization is also partly a fight against corruption and promotion of good governance.
So if you were to talk to President Obama and say, these are the 2 things that we really wish the U.S. would do to really facilitate and advance, what would those things be? And a little bit of introspection, the one thing that you think Africa needs to change, or African countries really need to change, work on. We know corruption has come up a number of times. We know that the issue of governance has come up a number of times, but if there's one thing that you would put that requires change, that would make a difference, really amplify the opportunity, what would that one thing be?
I think getting this integration done quickly and in a focused fashion and not having it be lip service is the fastest way to create economic growth and job creation.
The key thing that we need to understand is we need to, if we want the American companies / government to make an impact, we need to work from a standpoint of consolidating our strength, if you will. If we don't help and drive the infrastructure, and it's not just, as you heard, roads and power and et cetera, but it's healthcare, it's agriculture, it's all of the capability that Africa has will not come to fruition unless we really make an impact on this.
So you can, for any field you choose on our continent, you can look at something as a challenge or an opportunity. Be it energy, be it infrastructure, be it fertility, whatever it is. And this is the time to come and make those investments that will accompany us to our prosperity.
For more information on Africa and the Brown Capital Management Africa Forum Series, visit wilsoncenter.org. Click the Research tab and search under the Africa program.